welcome. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Audit, and as ever, I have my colleague, friend, and co-host, Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, as always, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Adi. Glad to be here.
Great, as ever, to have you here. And for both old and new viewers, let's go through what happens here, shall we? 10 stories that we've chosen from the week just gone by, 10 big stories. We hope they'll be interesting, and we go through them and we discuss them in some detail. We've got a story about the National Assembly returning, Operation Road Safety, an oil explosion in Nigeria where several people were killed, and an interesting one which we discussed last week where the Audit Commission had some very harsh things to say about COVID expenditure, and there's a kind of rebuttal from the Health Minister. But enough of that, let's get cracking, shall we? Now, the first one we're looking at, of course, National Assembly election took place recently, and so the new members have taken their seats in the National Assembly. And, of course, the arguments have already started. Have a look.
The work that has been done in certain committees, I think even if all we are not retained, but some should be retained to keep the memory of the committee.
I think both nominated members and elected members are given equal opportunity, looking at the guiding principle of our document, the standing order.
I am a member of the ECOWAS delegation. Honorable Speaker, by the virtue of this protocol, the selection committee should have been guided by this.
In response, as he winds up the debate, the mover of the motion, Honorable Tunkara, commended his colleagues for adding their contributions to the debate. He defended the reason for identifying committee chairpersons and issues of international delegations, particularly on the ECOWAS Parliament, which sees the existing delegation replaced with new members nominated to represent the Gambia.
Basically, the issue of ECOWAS membership or protocol cannot override. These are protocol, but cannot override our national laws. So the only authority, the only approving body to send you to ECOWAS is this national parliament.
As I said, the arguments have started straight away. Mr. Mboj, there are several things we could pick out from that. I'd like to start with the fact that, having listened to that debate in its entirety, the thing that stood out for me was that there really should have been a kind of orientation for the new National Assembly members about the rules, the procedures, and the protocols of the House. Some people seemed to be making it up as they went along, and some had no clue. And I found that quite shocking and rather distressing. What was your view about that?
Same here. I would have thought that they've already established a template. After all, from 2017, they encountered all of these things. So what happened then? What did we do, as it were? So yes, I was also equally surprised. We know that we have a good number of new National Assembly members, but still one would have thought that the new Speaker and others, we've got others there, one would have thought that they had their protocols, they had their steps, their procedures and processes, and they had gone through that. So it was interesting the thing that they had to debate these things, trying to establish nuts and bolts of parliamentary procedure.
This is it. So even though it was shocking to me, in a way I wasn't surprised, because if anyone listened to the debates leading to it, and even on the nomination day when people were going for nomination, and they were making speeches about what they were going to do in Parliament, which gave you the sense they had no clue about what procedures were in Parliament in order for them to get things passed. And so, having seen that, I thought, okay, well, maybe they'll get a month's grace where they go and they kind of going back to school almost, in order that they are acquainted with what needs to be done.
I said, ominous, sort of scary. Absolutely, but afterwards for me, I said, okay, this is what is.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
This is the situation.
This is the situation that obtains, and now what? Yeah. I think even when they were, because then for the session then, they were all being put, I think, in different select committees.
Well, this is it, and that's another point I was going to come to, because Honourable Tunkara there, who moved motion and various motions, said something quite interesting, which I felt was quite apt that he said it. And he said, people are being swept away from these committees, and you're not retaining any kind of institutional memory. from those committees, you're sweeping everybody out and putting new people in, and it's almost like reinventing the wheel. Rather than keeping some people who were part of the committee to kind of guide the new people, you're just getting rid of everybody and bringing in new people. And I actually had to agree with him on that. And it's something that we're guilty of across society, not just in the National Assembly, where we don't retain institutional memory, we don't retain people who have been in an institution or an organization and say, okay, new people are coming in, you stay, some of you go, and then you can kind of guide the new ones who are coming in. And I'm really, really fearful because people are going to have to learn the ropes from scratch rather than work with somebody who's been there, seen it, and done it.
That's it. And for me, when he said that, I also asked, what is actually the protocol? What is the procedure, the process in place for choosing, members of the select committees?
Right.
So I'm not quite sure. Hence when we heard the debate, the member for Banjul South saying that, they should follow perhaps the ECOWAS protocol. And then there when we heard Billy saying that actually it doesn't override and all of that.
It's a guidance. It's guidance and guidelines. It's not mandatory that you have to follow the protocol. It just says, if you want to do this, you might think about doing this this way. That's all it is.
What is good practice?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, let's just ask ourselves a very basic question. What is good practice in these situations? We know that we are new, but when we look around the world, really, the successful parliaments in the world, what are they doing? How are they doing it? To me, that's really what our question should be, so that we can move on.
I definitely agree with you on that one. So I don't know if you want to add anything onto that, but all I would like to say is that I think interesting times are ahead, based on what we've seen so far.
Oh, absolutely. God, from what we've had from the last parliament, and this is so important, the select committees. Remember the last time, at least towards the end, when the local government authorities absolutely were coming on, and we got a good glimpse, a sample of how public institutions are being run. What's going on with procurement processes and procedures, all ignored. What's going on with documentation of, where we spend the money. So we've seen all of these things thanks to their work. We're beginning to see a pattern. We had suspected that corruption is all over the place. People are not following what they should be doing. That sort of thing. But it helps for sort of these oversight bodies, as it were, to give us actually the evidence. So they have a huge task before them.
Well, this is it.
So our question is, can they do it competently?
That's it. I think that's a good one to leave hanging there. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Can they do it competently? On to something else, which Mr. Mboj and I think everybody sane has been kind of banging on about, and that is the Gambia's shameful road traffic accident record. Something I've been complaining about since I came to the Gambia, and I'm really, really pleased to see that in the last 2 or 3 weeks, this is something that's been taken up by everybody, because I think, if we don't all take it up, sanity will never prevail. What am I talking about? Have a look and be horrified at what you're going to hear and see now. Have a look.
Every day, newspapers report the death toll on our roads and the numbers are rising. This alarming statistic shows a growing trend and is proving traumatic for many people. It seems barely believable that, given her size, in the 2 years between 2017 and 2019, the Gambia went from being ranked 8th in the world to 4th among accident hotspot zones globally. Inevitably, this has become both worrying and depressing. Some blame poor road conditions, reckless driving and poorly maintained, unfit and unsafe vehicles on the roads for the frequent accidents. Superintendent Laminjai, Gambia Police PRO, says the Gambia Police Force is seriously concerned about this, prompting the launch of Operation Road Safety in collaboration with stakeholders to address and stop the shocking situation.
With this new strategy, every 2 kilometers will have police officers stationed there. They will not be on the road, but they will be on the side of the road observing traffic. What they will be looking into is vehicle speeding. Also, they will be looking at reckless driving on our road and dangerous driving issues. They will also be looking into vehicles overloading. And not only that also, but they will be looking into the headlights of vehicles, the issues about triangular reflectors, which are requirements of vehicles. Highway patrols are going to be introduced across the length and breadth of the country.
It sounds all very, very comforting, Mr. Mboj. And before we delve into this story, I'm kind of smiling because I've just realized that 3 of those accidents, images you saw, happened literally on my doorstep. Those are my photographs, some of them. In 3 of those accidents happened outside my door, and in 2 of them there were fatalities. Stonebridge, we heard PRO from the police there saying about, you know, highway patrol effectively. Are you hopeful? Please tell me you are.
What he said there, every 2 kilometers, the whole country. I'm just trying to imagine the logistics.
I think it will be in there are certain hot spots.
Certain hot spots.
There are certain hot spots. I think that is the intention. Yes.
What is the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, let us be honest here. Maybe there might be a legal aspect to it. Maybe we must begin from changing the laws.
Sure.
Isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So that we can tackle the problem. This is an epidemic.
Yeah,
there's no denying that.
You know, I sent an email to the President's office about 4 or 5 weeks ago saying this is an epidemic and it should be declared as such. Because the statistic that is there, I can say, you know, I don't remember anybody quoting it before I did. And it was because I was doing a piece for the BBC. In the end, I decided not to include it in the BBC piece because I thought it was too shocking. Now, the piece I wrote was in 2019. And so I went back to the WHO figures from 2017, and then Gambia was 8th. By the time I wrote the piece in 2019, Gambia was 4th. I sit here trembling, shuddering at the fact that 3 years on, Gambia is probably number 1. Gambia, a country of just over 2 million people, is probably number 1. Imagine 2017 we were 8th, 2019 we were 4th, and then we've had 3 years where the figures seem to have gotten worse. I can't imagine we've moved down rather than up that shocking table. So, as you say, every 2 kilometers in certain hotspots, yes, there are certain black spots. There are certain places up country where people have died, you know, speeding on a bend and so on. And you thought, you know, put speed bumps in all these. You don't even need police in some of them. Just put speed bumps everywhere. Trust me, that will almost cure it, because you can't speed on them unless you want to damage your car. But, you know, I really wonder how serious this is. And it's so serious it should be more than just a cosmetic. And I say so serious because we've just had another statistic in a month, 40 people killed in 1 month. Now, if you extrapolate that across the year, you're probably talking about 480 people killed on the roads in a country the size of this one. Really, really shocking.
Absolutely. You see, the reason why I said that earlier, you know, I was going off sort of a different route, was that, you know, when we spoke to the President of Gambia Transport Union, he was talking about the insurance aspects that would change 1 or 2 things, whatever. We're not going to go into that. But this is it. And in fact, on our program this morning, we had a representative of the Ministry of Transport, and that's it. He was talking about the 4 E's, you know, the engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency medical services, and all of these things.
That's right.
So this is a multi-dimensional issue.
It is.
So with the police, what you're talking about, the enforcement bit, well, we've never seen it in the past. Right now, all you're saying this is that we are going to do it, yet on all promises. So it will take us time before we can judge what you're saying. But if we go by what we've seen in the past, especially with these operations, they're time bound.
Operation Clear the Streets, I remember.
Operation Do
Whatever happened to that one?
That's it. They just fizzle out. They just lose all traction somehow along the way. So this is it. Let us really get serious, because a lot of families, can you imagine the suffering, the pain that people are going through? It's really alarming. Somebody should really take these things seriously and know that you got to come with the right policies and ideas.
Well, this is it. And you know, just to kind of depress people even further, I know we have other stories to do, but just this morning, the morning of this program, my colleagues came in and said, oh God, there's been another terrible instance where somebody in a wheelchair was hit and killed by a car speeding, and the driver did not stop. He just carried on, and people went, and the person was found dead by his wheelchair. I mean, why are people obsessed with speeding in this country? I really don't know. And to me, that's one of the things we have to look into as well.
That's it. Perhaps the lack of education and a general sense of impunity. I mean, you don't get the sense that you've got authorities around.
Because
so I can do whatever and just get away with it.
That's right.
We see it all the time. I commute. I don't own a car. I use all these taxis all the time. And when I look, sometimes I just sort of stand there, sometimes gobsmacked, wondering what is going on here. There seems to be a complete breakdown. People may not perhaps know the regulations.
Sure.
Or just and I do things out of convenience, my own convenience. It doesn't matter what is right, what is polite. I have no respect really for the other. It's an extraordinary situation that you see when you're out there in the muscle looking at people and how we are behaving. Then I wonder, oh my God, where am I? Is this the same Gambia? I feel like I'm in a different country. I have to say that.
Thank you for that. And I have to say to some of my friends, I love you, but sometimes when I get in your cars, you become a different person. I'm not sure why that happens, but we really need to look at our attitude. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now on to our third story, something quite completely different. And now for over 50 years, Nigeria has been Africa's biggest oil producer. And yet, because of challenges in meeting even local demand, things like this happen. Have a look.
Despite being Africa's largest oil producer, where oil has been produced since the late 1950s, the country does not refine enough oil to meet local demand, leading to frequent fuel shortage queues. This led to illegal oil refineries sprouting up across the country to meet the demand.
Nigeria, if you know my name, Adeyemi Olusegun Abiose, those are all Yoruba names. You know, I have some Nigerian ancestry back then with my great-great-grandparents. And so I've always had a kind of interest in what happens in Nigeria, Mr. Mboj. It depresses me that this country, I said 50 years, is more than 60 years, in fact. They're the only official African country that's an oil producer that has oil shortage and oil and fuel queues. Why is it that Nigeria has gotten it so badly wrong for so many years?
Quite interesting. and in that Yoruba ancestry lineage, a lot of people in Banjul as well, the Akus, they have that lineage.
That's right.
I was quite interesting. I was listening to Ojukwu, Biafra,
former Biafran leader,
and sort of analyzing Nigeria.
You're right.
Sort of the imbalance. From day one, it seems it was always
never
going to be difficult for that experiment. Because Nigeria was formed not based on the imperatives, as it were, the geography, what is there, the people, the geography, but what the colonizer really wanted.
Absolutely.
So the contradictions in there, I mean the resources, what's in there, but again, the most important element, the human being. What has colonialism done to us? What has colonialism done to us? Why? One, and then what they're trying to make Nigerians sort of walk through, what they have to construct, what they expect of Nigerians given what is, and then where they want to go is extremely difficult. It's a huge task.
It's a huge task, and as I said, and you know, every now and then we get these tragedies similar to this one, and you know, because of some stories that we're going to be doing throughout the year, of course, I've been delving into Nigerian history, and of course, you realize that on the brink of independence, the North wanted to break away and said, look, unless we get certain guarantees, we don't want to be part of this new country that's going to be called Nigeria. And even the name was a British woman who came up with the name Nigeria, a journalist, you know. And so it's bizarre because obviously she used the the Niger River, which and you know, you can check honestly. It's an English woman came up with the name Nigeria, and so it's never been a country. And so because it's never functioned, you have all these competing interests. You have the East, of course you have the North where there's Sharia, and the rest of the country there isn't Sharia. And it's really, really, I got really told off by some friends when I wrote an article 15 years ago, say, will Nigeria one day break up? They thought I was being alarmist. I doubt if they read that article now, whether they would still say that. But because of that kind of dysfunction, that's why we have a state where a country of that size producing that amount of oil sends majority of its oil abroad to be processed. Thankfully, it's about to be remedied before the end of the year with Dangote's oil refinery, where he says he will be able to meet the demands of everything that's produced in Nigeria.
Absolutely. And the inequities, as it were, for instance, when I looked at this area where the accident took place, the Delta, Niger Delta,
underdeveloped.
Then you think about Ken Saro-Wiwa.
Right.
You return back to that, then you realize really that this area, there have been issues, controversies regarding this for a very long time. Yeah. So these inequities will push people to start creating their own refineries.
Yeah, and their own economy. And that's exactly what they're doing.
That's really what happened here. Yeah, and it's been happening for a very, very long time.
Sure.
So this is the tragedy of it. Sure. And it's no use at all going around telling people, this is unsafe, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. There must be certain conditions.
Yeah. They'll say to you, what are the alternatives for me?
That's it, yeah. Certain conditions that would make people follow these rules. We can live as a civilized society, but then must come from certain structures, as it were. But it seems as if we tend to fall back on that moralizing, the homilies. No, we shouldn't do this. It is unpatriotic.
Right. I think on that note, I think really and truly there's still a lot that needs to be done, and it still leaves a lot to be desired as to what's happening in Nigeria. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to our fourth story. On the previous program, we mentioned that the Audit Office had come out and they'd been quite scathing about government misuse of COVID-19 funds. The Health Minister was really stung by this, and he has responded. Have a look.
Items more expensive, even though there were largely no specifications by the two new potential people who said they could supply. And it should be emphasized that these two new suppliers had seen the list and prices of the first supplier before they decided to come in to say they can supply. It was confirmed that the pre-procurement negotiations with the TMS company, that's the supplier, were sound, and the procurement is thus high value for money. We therefore totally disagree with this audit finding that is saying money could have been saved, $1.2 to $1.7 million could have been saved, because these are the facts, and this was the management response which deliberately was ignored by the auditors.
Now, I didn't want you to think I was putting words in the mouth of the Honourable Minister. So I wanted you to hear him say that this was deliberately ignored by the auditors. Mr. Mboj, if this had happened in England or America, France, any of those countries, a minister making that kind of statement about the Audit Commission, it would have been headline news.
Absolutely.
Here, nobody blinked.
At all. You must deliver the evidence.
You've
made some really
very, very
damning
strong
accusations, very, very strong accusations. Being deliberately ignored. Evidence or documents deliberately ignored. I mean, he's attributing a certain motive.
And in fact, if we'd played the whole thing with uncut and without our reporter's intervention, that is exactly what he says. He didn't hint at it. He actually said it, that they had some sort of ulterior motive and they wanted to get at him and the ministry and so on. I mean, it was quite, for me, explosive stuff.
Absolutely. but for some of us, we said, okay, hold on. Wasn't it the same minister in 2020?
Quite. Our memories went back to 2020.
Our memories went back.
Yep.
But all they talk about is money, money, money.
That's right.
That's a quote.
When he appeared in the National Assembly, he said
he said, that's why I said our work is very difficult.
Yep. This is it.
So
and now someone else has kind of said exactly that, and he's taking issue with them. So it seems all rather curious. But this one, I'm sure will run and run, because again, when we ended that report, we did say that we would wait and see whether the audit office would actually respond, because he's made a very serious allegation against them.
Absolutely. But for me as a citizen, all I will say is that when I look at the National Audit Office, as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard anything untoward about them. It appears as if that they're doing their work professionally. Sure. And then here I said it appears as if I'm not endorsing anything, because one may never know.
Never know.
So as a citizen, I am going to listen to the National Audit Office.
This is it.
Yes,
sure.
absolutely. And that's the body I will listen to.
Sure.
Now the burden is on the other side, really. Denying all sorts of things and making all kinds of accusations, really terrible accusations. So let them come and prove it. We really have to push them and say, now tell us, what do you know?
That's right.
That we don't.
Right. Yeah.
Why should they have it in for you?
Well, this is it. I mean, they've got no axe to grind, you would think. So let's, bring the proof.
Show us the axe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now on to our fifth story, which takes us to halfway into the program. Much of Europe, and one might say much of the rest of the world, breathed a sigh of relief over something that happened in France this very week. What was that? I'm sure you've guessed, but if you haven't guessed, have a look.
Time unlucky for her, having failed in two previous attempts in 2012 and 2017 to convince French voters to elect her president. Her far-right National Rally Party has been described variously as nationalist populist, xenophobic, anti-EU, racist, and, on the whole, toxic to the status quo. Macron, on the other hand, had cast himself as the progressive champion of pro-European liberals of the right and the left. As much as Le Pen had tried in recent years to detoxify her party's image, she still couldn't persuade enough voters to give her the keys to the Élysée Palace.
I could come to Marine Le Pen later on, but you heard the dulcet tones of Mr. Mboj there in that story, and you delved into this in some detail, Mr. Mboj, and it was a very good report. But hardly a resounding endorsement for Macron.
At all.
What was it all about?
Absolutely. so in the end, when you look at the sort of like the French people who sort of study, look at the French political scene, it appears as if this time it was really between the halves, the well-off, and those at the bottom of the round, as it were. Yeah. Most of them flocked to Le Pen.
Le Pen,
that's it.
That's
but
right.
the well-off and all the rest of it stayed with Macron.
That's right.
But again, you also realize that the absenteeism,
huge
absenteeism, deliberate spoiling of votes.
Yeah, indeed, yes.
So when you look at it all, really, 62% of voters didn't vote for Macron.
And I found it bizarre, before you go on, when they interviewed somebody on the BBC, he said, yes, I voted, but I deliberately spoiled my vote. They said, well, why did you vote? He said, because it's a civic duty to vote, which seemed to be, you deliberately spoiled your vote, but you voted nonetheless. You may as well have not voted, but yeah. So
that's exactly it. I remember during our elections, some people were saying that, but if you do not go and vote, then it means that you are unpatriotic. I said, calm down, look around the world and see how democracy works. Sometimes refusing to go and vote is a political gesture.
It's a statement in itself.
So that sort of thing. Right. So this is it. But again, it seems that with Le Pen, with all that baggage, the association,
not being able to shake it off.
Given this moment now, there's the war in Ukraine.
Quite.
COVID-19, the pandemic.
That's right.
The uncertainty.
Yes.
I wasn't sure whether, it has been said, whether the French were willing to take a risk.
This is it.
And numbers are going up.
They're going up, yes.
There's something to be worried about.
Third time unlucky.
Absolutely.
But it was close-ish. More than 40%, 42% in fact.
That's it. Yeah. So this time, not quite.
Yeah, quite.
I'm not sure. They do not want to add on to the uncertainty.
Yeah, indeed. But as you said, next time, and Macron has a huge task on his hand to turn that around for whomever comes after him, because Marine's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, I think he stood 5 times unsuccessfully, and I think the most he got was 20-something% or 19-point-something%. Now she's polling 42% with pretty much her father's clothes she's wearing, really.
Absolutely. But what she's been trying, what has she been doing? She's been trying to sort of detoxify,
And
as I said, soften, as it were, the image of it, because of the associations, xenophobes, anti-EU, anti-that, racist, and all the rest of it. No, you're trying to reorient, as it were, the party so that it can become electable.
Well, this is it. And, they talked about populists in the kind of Trump thing. It's always amazed me that, people who want to get elected in America say to Americans, the world disrespects us, I will make them respect us again, I will make America great again. And she said something similar, I'm fighting to save the soul of France. France is becoming ever less French. Vote for me and I will save that Frenchness. And that, some people responded to that because it's a big thing in France. And if you haven't been to France, people don't quite get it. Well, go and stay there for a month and you'll really get it, that kind of thing about we are French, we're special, we're this, we're that. There's a thing about being French. And she appealed to that and appealed to it quite successfully and scarily successfully.
Absolutely. But again, you realize that she did something else. She took up the pedal from Brexit.
Quite.
After Brexit, she was talking about the idea of Brexit,
indeed.
But then took up the pedal.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So France is a slightly different country from the United States. Just as Britain is different. They will all do their own thing, sort of in their own manner, in their own way. So that is it. Sure. But the left, those who think that they are the custodians of liberal capitalism.
Sure.
There's a challenge coming in France as well. There is. So it depends on how he manages it. In fact, his statement, wasn't it? After the speech, he will unite. He realized that the country is divided. Just as we've seen in Britain and in America. And that sort of thing. The country is divided. So what are you going to do, as it were, to bring people together?
Thanks for that. And I told our colleague Choi when we were discussing this, I said France can stop pretending that it's a liberal country anymore. When you have 42% voting for somebody like her. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us nicely to a mid-time break. And then after the break, we will have 5 more stories. So don't go away. Join us after the break.
I am the light goddess. Everything I touch turns into light. I am the light at the end of the tunnel, and my technology is the answer. I am the happiness in your life. I keep you connected, and I am Q-Power. I am Q-Cell. I am Senior Boss. We innovate, others follow. Call 111 for more information.
Welcome back after that break, or if you're just joining us, welcome to the program. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, and with me going through the stories is Mr. Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, again, thank you and welcome to the program again.
Thank you.
To the second half of the program. Now, in the Gambia, I used to delete the word porous borders from every story because I got fed up of hearing it. But there really are some porous borders around the Gambia, and none more so has been brought to light than what has happened in Casamance. However, Gambia's army have been going around trying to do something to remedy the fears of people who live in communities close to Casamance. Have a look at this.
I was from Balen, then Karunur, going to Baipal and Gilamfari. These are the red zones. This was where some of the rebels were staying behind. 100 meters from here, you are into Casamas. So the people here endured a lot of suffering, but however, with the confidence-building patrols conducted by the armed forces, it was able to restore confidence, and you can see life is still going on normal. People are doing their normal activities in the village.
100 meters and you're in Casamance, as we heard him say there, Mr. Mboj. The army been going around. He sort of tried to give the sense that there was normalcy, but we heard in another story, an Alcalo, in fact it might even have been in this story, and Alcalo saying, well, actually it's not quite normal because we're trying to get the children back into school, but only the headmaster has turned up, none of the teachers have. So not quite normal yet, is it?
At all, obviously, and for obvious reasons. You know, one understands with ordinary people, they'll be quite apprehensive and the like. But for me, when I listened to that news piece, and I thought, okay, yes, there's no fighting between Senegalese forces and MFDC. Yes, I can understand your patrols. When there's fighting, what are you going to do?
Yeah, quite. Are you going to be based here?
What can you do when there's actual fighting between them?
Sure.
When they are not fighting, it's easy to go around on your patrols. So let's be honest with ourselves.
And for anyone watching, what happened in that instance is, well, they took the press around to show them that things were getting back to normal. I don't know, 30 or 40 pressmen and women accompanied the army. But as you rightly say, you know, when you could see people actually took them and showed them areas where shells had landed. And that's a daily and a constant reminder. And when you have that staring you in the face, you don't feel safe just because there's a kind of photo op for the army. Will you? You know?
No, that's exactly it. I have to say this. One is the troubles when they first flared up. The president has set up an inquiry.
That's right, yes.
We haven't heard from that
Not yet.
I think, what is our strategic position in this?
Sure.
That will enable the army, they will know what to do, what not to do. I suspect that we are all, this is sort of uncertain, we are all in some kind of uncertain territory.
Well, that's right.
The economic and our national army, GAF, what would be the demarcations of responsibilities?
Sure.
Have we worked on that?
This is it.
I really do not know what was going on there. What is our strategic
Lots of
position
uncertainty.
there?
I mean, you heard people from the Fonyi saying that we don't mind ECOMIC, but we don't want Senegalese. So this investigation, we don't know whether that's been included. I've heard nothing since it was announced. I mean, it might be that we're not looking in the right places, Mr. Mboj, but certainly you would have thought, given the seriousness of the situation, there might have been something saying, oh, this is what the investigation has found, or this is how far it's got, this is how it's progressing, or not, as the case may be. But I don't recall hearing or seeing anything of that nature.
At all. And as I understand with the recent flare-ups, according to NDMA, the National Disaster Management Agency, more than 5,000, 5,600 still displaced.
Sure.
So there are repercussions for people out there, what's going on. But we know that if we do not have a long-term solution, it will recur.
Of course.
It will recur. It will not terminate. So this is it. We must really engage with what is going on there and try to come up with ideas. Or are we just sort of following the wind, the tide? It just depends on what happens
every
tomorrow.
time it flares up, we react.
We're just being reactive. What can we do? Even the whole area. Can we broker a deal through ECOWAS? Now you're beginning to hear certain analysts saying that maybe with the Casamas problem, you need a region-wide solution.
Sure. It's been festering since 1982 in this kind of armed conflict way.
Low intensity, every once in a while it will flare up, and then some agreements, and then until the next time. So can we be just as what Gambia used to be? There was a time when Gambia used to lead in certain things, as it were, even the formation of ECOMIC. We were among the leaders there.
That's right.
Can we lead, never mind our size, and look at our big brother and say, look, brother, we need to go to ECOWAS to really solve this one, or even come with an idea. Do we have people with expertise, experience, who can do stuff like that? But otherwise, until the next time, Ade.
Yeah, which is a sad reality. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to something else, which something that sort of is discussed quite a lot, not just in the Gambia, but pretty much across the world, mainly because of migration. Lots of people have dual citizenship, and it's had its kind of ups and downs and its good and a bad side, including some of what you'll hear in this clip.
Dr. Paley coins the term diasporacracy to highlight how citizenship can be a tool for post-conflict development as well as a vehicle to reinforce inequalities, citing specific examples during ex-Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's administration.
So I talk about a diaspora Liberian who was recruited to the Ministry of Finance who helped to institute $4.9 billion debt cancellation for Liberia. This is someone who had worked for the IMF and now works for the World Bank. However, there's a flip side of this particular arrangement in which those returnees or those diasporas who come back and work in the public sector also engage in corrupt forms of post-war profiteering in which they engage in graft, they engage in corruption practices. And many of them, in the case of Liberia, were alleged to have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from the national coffers, but were never prosecuted.
There we heard Dr. Robtel Paley there, and I admit now she is a personal friend, so but I think that has nothing to do with what is a very good book. Mr. Mboj, you've read the book, or you've read most of it. And I said in the lead up to that, the kind of good and bad side of this kind of dual citizenship. It has proved contentious in many countries, including here in the Gambia, where allegedly the constitution allows you to be a dual citizenship, but only up to a certain point, because there are certain things that are entitlements of every citizen, and yet if you are a dual citizen, you don't have them, including being a member of parliament or being the president, which kind of makes sense. But as Dr. Robtel there says, there are other elements of it. I love the diasporacracy. I wish I'd thought of that one. But some elements there that, and you attended that talk, and there were certain things that you picked up because we discussed it when you guys came back.
Absolutely. What is a citizen? I mean, we're most sort of basically, and by the way, I am a diasporacrat. The way I said that immediately. So this is it. And the example, she used Liberia as a case study.
Sure.
Can you imagine that there was a time when the indigenes, those who were born there, didn't have citizenship rights?
They couldn't vote.
They couldn't vote.
I know very well. I have many relatives who grew up there, and yeah, they were from Sierra Leone, and yet they could vote.
Absolutely.
Where indigenes could not. You know, my great-great-grandparents' brother.
So now things have moved on, though.
Yes.
You know, the cycle of history. Now people in there, they don't want the ones out there to have dual citizenship. Payback time, as it were.
It pretty much is, because they come and they swagger and so on. And I had a discussion with Dr. Robtel, or let me just call her Robtel, after that. And she was saying that, you know, those who come back at Easter or Christmas, particularly Christmas, they flood back. They're called Decemberists, in the way that we use semester here. And in Sierra Leone, we just say JCs. They come for a while, they swagger around, and you can pick them out a mile, even though they try and dress like the locals. Something always makes them stand out. Usually it's the white flannel hanging from their back pockets. But the good side is that if they come with good intentions, these are people who have a foot in both camps. They know something of their home, and they know something of the host country in which they live, if that can be harnessed. But it's proven in many countries. I won't mention the obvious one, but in many countries it's been quite difficult to kind of strike the right balance.
Absolutely. For instance, remember here that we were worried because there's a lot about talk about diaspora people and the like, and even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they had established a directorate regarding this. So we were worried that it wouldn't be party politicized, as it were. Then that wouldn't give us really the optimum that we can harness these people. But what I like about Dr. Paley's lecture, because I was there, remember? So was that how the theoretical framing, as it were, the 3 R's, as it were, as she calls it. You have the relationships, as it were, the rights and the responsibilities, and identity as this passive notion. It's a passive notion. You know, I'm born into a Wolof, I'm a Wolof, or I'm a Gambian. But again, there's the practice, the active. If I call myself a Gambian or Wolof or whatever, what actions would that lead me to? As it were. So out of this interaction, this is where citizenship will evolve. So all notions of my identity will even evolve, given that my conversations with others. So I bought into that. And she even gave us an example in Liberia, how much people who came over, how much they helped and did stuff that was tangible, tangible outcomes. Everybody could see that. But in the end, when she said that, but some of them were found to be sort of involved in graft. I'm like, that's not because they are from there. That's a human condition. We are worse. If it comes to that, the indigenes, we are worse to ourselves. Now, that is not an issue.
It just shows that we're just human beings.
We are just human beings. So, but we all understand. So, with them as well, when you come over, don't expect us to pay you as an expatriate. She made that point. Some of them were expecting that.
That's right.
Since you say that you belong,
then
be an indigene.
Absolutely.
So we're going to pay you as we pay everybody else. Really. So you owe
that's a difficult
the
one.
society. That's a difficult one.
It's a really difficult one, but you're right, absolutely. And it's something that will rumble on and on across all the countries where people have dual citizenship rights. But as I said in the lead up, in some cases those rights stop at a certain point, and those certain points, like a member of parliament or the president, it means that you can't have your cake and eat it. So yeah,
we should scrap that.
Well, this is it.
I say that I've allowed you to have dual citizenship. Why should I penalize you for that?
But
essentially, that's what you're telling me. You're giving it to me, and then you want to penalize me for something like being a National Assembly member.
You can do some things, but not everything.
That's it. Maybe I can understand with the presidency.
You know
what I mean? I'm willing to allow that.
But even that could be contentious.
The principle is the same.
If somebody took it, and anybody watching this who's from Sierra Leone probably knows the Kande Yumkela case. Before the last election, they tried to disqualify him for that very reason. And the case ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court, and the court made a very sensible judgment. It said you can't claim that somebody is a citizen and then deny them certain rights that are available to every citizen.
That's a contradiction.
So you either say you can't be a dual citizen, or you can. You can't say you can, but. And so I think if anybody in Gambia wants to challenge that one, I'll be right behind them, and I'll give them the case papers from the Yumkela case. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. Now on to something else. 50 years ago, Kwame Nkrumah died, and he was, it must be said, a giant in the sort of annals of African independence and African history and Pan-Africanism. But he also had feet of clay. Have a look, have a listen.
He turned Ghana into one-party state. In 1965, J.B. Dankwa, Nkrumah's former ally, would die in prison having been jailed by Nkrumah. By the time of the coup on February 24, 1966, the Ghanaian economy was in crisis with general shortages of basic goods. And according to some sources, a pervading sense of fear had enveloped the country as the Nkrumah government clamped down on political foes.
Mr. Mboj, we heard, I said feet of clay. Some time ago, I always get dragged into these Zoom panel debates, and we were having one about Thomas Sankara. And I felt it was a bit too cozy. So I thought, let me throw a grenade in there and just kind of muddy the waters a bit. Great Pan-Africanist, great lots of things. And I said, does everybody know that what we are saying here about Thomas Sankara is kind of what was said about Nkrumah and what was said about Mugabe? I said, are we lionizing, praising this guy because he died young, not because he had a chance to grow old and become a despot or a dictator? You mentioned Dankwa in that piece there, shameful end to Dankwa, somebody who was once a friend and comrade of Nkrumah's. But as I said, nonetheless, we still hold him up as a great son of Africa, Kwame Nkrumah.
Oh, absolutely. He was lionized in his time, in many ways, but just for a while. In Ghana certainly, but we saw what happened in Ghana, but again in the rest of Africa as well. You realize that for others. You know, what Kwame wanted was unbelievable. Sorry, Kwame Nkrumah. What he wanted was unbelievable. He wanted these people to forego their hard-earned sovereignty.
Sure.
You are never going to have a union government.
Yeah, quite,
you see?
quite.
So that shine, he lost that shine really in the rest of Africa.
Sure.
I think that was why when OAU was formed, the headquarters, wouldn't you be surprised that it wasn't in Ghana, in Accra?
Quite.
See, he was the undisputed head, as it were.
Ended up being
but
Addis
it ended
Ababa.
up being in Addis Ababa. So a lot of people really didn't like his style. They admired him as it were. Trailblazer, opened the way for everybody. But this is it. This was during the Cold War. In fact, we do know afterwards, was it the papers we got in 1995 that the CIA actually killed them.
Well,
they were part of it.
They're part of the ones who, certainly for the coup d'etat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you do get some literature, you do read stuff and they're telling you, Nkrumah, One Africa. Do you know what that means
for the rest
of the world with all the resources? Never in a million years where they're going to allow that.
Yes, I have a kind of personal recollection, not that I ever met or saw him, but my father went to visit Guinea when my father was a government minister. He went to visit family in Guinea-Conakry, and he wanted to stay with family, but Sékou Touré heard, oh, there's a Sierra Leonean government minister in town. We can't have him not staying at the presidential palace. So my father stayed there. And one morning he woke up and he was just walking along the balcony and there was a bungalow inside the presidential compound. And he saw this man sort of run in. And then the soldiers, 2 soldiers approached my father and said, oh, I'm sorry, we should have told you, nobody is allowed to stand on this balcony. And he's like, why not? They said, because that bungalow is where Nkrumah lives. And he has this fear of being assassinated. And he's paranoid about it. And so, please, we should have told you. Honestly, my father wept. He thought this great man that I admire has been reduced to scuttling into that. And in fact, he couldn't even bring himself to meet him after. And something he regretted afterwards because he thought maybe I should have facilitated an introduction and just say, look, I really admire you in spite of everything. But my father was so upset by this notion that he never did so. And that always stuck with me, that this man who, you know, even now we celebrate him for what he did, but those other things he did, you know, locking up opponents, killing opponents, really tainted the legacy somewhat.
Absolutely. In the end, he really couldn't trust anybody.
At all.
I don't think he thought that people understood what he wanted to do.
Quite.
He thought that he was the only one who could do it.
And that's...
Absolutely. Yeah. There was the megalomania, as it were, and the rest of it. But again, his basic insights.
Sure.
To my mind, the basic insight is still true, and that's what we say all the time.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I urge people, go and read his publications, and you will see that what he said then still holds today about Africa and Pan-Africanism, about unity and so on, about working collectively for the sake of Africa.
Look at the industrialization drive.
Quite.
That's all. That's what we all want. And then really the only way that we can really call ourselves emancipated, liberated, is really if we come together, pool resources together. One after the other will be picked off by them very, 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 very easily.
Sure.
So to my mind, the basic insight there, the flaws such as there were the flaws of human beings.
Sure.
Lord Acton, the person we credit with the phrase, the wonderful phrase, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. What follows? Great men are almost always bad men.
Exactly.
They're always awkward.
Sure.
They've got such high standards. They will drive everybody to madness. Sometimes they can even have that megalomania. Only I can understand.
That's right.
But his heart was in the right place.
That's right. I think so. I agree with you.
That's exactly how I see Nkrumah.
Thank you for that. And now on to our penultimate story. Route licensing scheme. We probably won't spend too much on this one, but this scheme has been piloted so far, and you are wondering, what is it? Have a look.
Union which work with the Ministry of Transport, go to the garage by garage, this period of Ramadan, drivers by registering. No, that's just continued process. No, we are convincing them. But things cannot change one day. This province are here over 30 years now. You cannot change within 1 month. That cannot be possible.
The implementation has started, and then we are issuing out this permit. And then I will take this opportunity also to call on drivers to come and register with the ministry. In terms of compliance, some are complying, some drivers, but you know, this is a new initiative because this is the first time we're introducing this in the Gambia. And of course, there will be challenges.
It's a pilot scheme, as I said, leading up to that, Mr. Mboj. As I said, we won't spend much time on this. It's being piloted in certain areas, and essentially, for those who are not aware, route licensing scheme means that you are licensed to ply a certain route and no other if you are a commercial vehicle. And as we heard from Mr. Cisse there from the Transport Union, it's likely to take a while to bed in because people just aren't used to it, and it's going to take a while to get used to it.
Absolutely. If I'm not used to it, you make them be used to it. It's a new scheme. Sure. So obviously, I will suspend judgment. Yeah, wonderful idea. Sure. But we'll see how it's going to happen. I'm not going to slag them off.
No, me neither. I mean, I don't want to prejudge. I don't want to prejudge. But
so of course, this is what we all want.
It's what we want, but
organization.
My contribution will be saying that I think it's a tough one to enforce. And so I'm not sure they got the resources, but we wait and see, I think. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And on to our final story. Malaria remains a scourge in much of sub-Saharan Africa, killing more people than COVID, than Ebola, than several other diseases combined. Have a look.
Last year, about 95% of the estimated 228 million cases occurred in the WHO African region, along with 602,000 reported deaths. 6 of our countries, the worst affected by malaria in the region, have reported 55% of the globally reported cases.
The WHO.
And there we heard WHO, Dr. Desta Tirone, telling us about malaria and saying that in 6 countries in sub-Saharan Africa account for 55% of the global figure of malaria cases. And yet we know of countries that have eradicated it. And also in there, which we didn't see, he talks about there needs to be government will to accommodate. Given that it's so damaging, why do we not have that government will to try and eradicate it? I mean, people have been wishing and hoping for some sort of vaccine. Well, the countries that have eliminated it have not used the vaccine. So why have the others not copied them?
That's exactly
and we don't have much time. We have
absolutely it. Why we haven't here? Well, we haven't implemented the right policies.
Sure.
It's just as simple as that. Sure. A question of governance. Sure. In some areas, they have better governance structures. That's where you tend to see certain outcomes. So, but that's really what it means.
Not rocket science.
It's not rocket science at all.
On that note, I said we won't spend much on those last two stories, Mr. Mboj. As ever, thank you for your interventions and interjections. Most welcome. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And I always say to the viewers, thank you for staying with us. Until next time, goodbye.